I really want to talk about that from a broad view, but then also go deeper into, and feel free to ask questions, that really helps a lot, go deeper into like what that means and how we've lost it. So the idea is we're actually headed back to this thing that I call the child of innocence, or that perspective of where we came from. So it's kind of funny because like you start out as what you are meant to be, but without the wisdom of what it is that you are. And then as you progress, you actually lose that point of view of that innocence, and you become jaded and you experience all these things. And so eventually your potential is decreased, but you're mature. So it's sort of kind of give and take, but it was never designed to be that. If you were raised in a world that nurtured your potential since you were a kid, and you were able to keep your innocence, what would it look like? It wouldn't look like this world. And that's the beauty of where we're headed, is we're going to that. And for all of us that are older, that are not little tiny kids anymore, that's okay, because we can actually go back to that childlike perspective. And that's really what human potential is. Childish is when we're first born. We don't know what we don't know, and we don't really know how to know what we don't know. And we're kind of at the mercy of others in that process of like taking care of us and this other thing, right? Because we're not mature yet. But then as we progress forward, we become mature, and oftentimes we give up the childlike perspective and move into even more childish behavior most times. But it's this maturity that we're supposed to find along the journey while we stay in that childlike wonder. And if you can look at the world from that place of childlike wonder, you'll see that we're literally living in a miracle, and every moment is a miracle. So the real question is, how do we reactivate that human potential? How do we come back into being designers and creators, right? Like that's what everybody wants to know. And it's really simple. It's this moment. In this moment, you choose that thing. And if you want to choose that, you choose it. And then you ask yourself, what is keeping me from that choice? And if you do that, you'll find that you know the next step. And then you take care of that thing that's keeping you from that choice. And then you take the next step and you ask again, hey, what is keeping me from what I want? What is keeping me from this imagination that I seek? And you just keep taking those steps. And as you continue to take those steps, you'll find that the currents in the world that are running are actually designed to help you take those steps. So instead of taking one step begrudgingly, constantly, you actually notice that you take a step, and then all of a sudden you start kind of floating towards your next step. And then this momentum builds, and then you just end up at your dream destination. And you don't know how you got there. You don't even remember the journey as much as you used to, because you're so much in that presence that it doesn't matter what has happened or what could happen, because you're just flowing in faith. Children do this naturally. And that's what's so cool. Is like if you actually watch a child, they're already flowing in faith. The only problem is that we begin to take away their potential by telling them that you can't do things. Certain things are not possible. Well, they're not possible for us yet. That doesn't mean they're not possible for them. It's about them learning what is possible and not possible for them. And our job is never to take away what is possible and possible for them. Our job is to allow their possibilities to show us what's possible, because we don't even know. They come from a greater space. The very act that a child is born from your wisdom and your partner's wisdom is a huge thing that is often forgotten. That child is manifestation of the next generation. That child is a manifestation of a new level of possibility. And that's what human potential is. We, as older individuals who are not in that child state anymore, are to learn from these children, not to think that we're here to teach them.
That's a really big one, Jason. And I think from my journey, I have a 4-year-old, and you get so caught up in your view and vision of the world, and even in parenting, like it's a constant process of stepping back and allowing. And I think that's where, within ourselves, it's our past, our upbringing, our path that gets that clouded vision. And it really is, I've been trying to do this for 4 years with my daughter, and probably less because she was a baby, but really trying to step back. And it's still very much a work in progress for me, but it's it's becoming more now this awareness and what you said at the start about being in this moment, because then I can catch myself before kind of taking her down a path based on what my experiences have been, either as a child myself or as an adult.
Exactly. Yeah. And not limiting their potential is key. Like that's the main thing. When you think of human potential, think of what is possible if you weren't limited. Just think of that version of you for a second right now. Just take that moment and just go, okay, if I had not been limited in any way, shape, or form, what could I have achieved? And here's the coolest part. You're not limited in any way, shape, or form. You just believe you are. So the moment that you actually create this ally of what is possible, you can naturally see what kept you from that possibility. And you can begin to claim your power back from those things. And all of a sudden, this new ally that you've created becomes you in a few weeks to a month. It's very fast, so much faster than it's ever been. We have the capability to become who we are. We cannot actually, there's no such thing as people taking our power away from us. It is a give every single time. This means that there is nothing that is stopping you other than you. And it's a pretty controversial statement. I've heard a lot of people say, well, that's not true. The government's doing this or that, right? But you're choosing to live in that government. So you are choosing to have this experience. And the moment that you take yourself out of victim and you begin to acknowledge that and see that, you can begin to change the way that you play the game. And if you play the game differently, that's cool. Maybe that means that you don't like the country you're in, and so you move from that country. Maybe right now that's not a possibility, so you go, what will help me get to the ability to move from this country? And you begin those steps. You see, it's not instant. Everyone wants instant manifestation, but if you had instant manifestation, you would be dead right now, because your thoughts would interfere with that thing that you really want, and you would end up with something else. You'd be like, I would really like a rhino, but I hope that rhino wouldn't trample me. And then what would happen is you would be trampled by that rhino instantly, but you would get your rhino, right? And that's important to understand. Like, until we have the clarity of thought and the ability to discern in the strength of that, having the power of God would be the most dangerous thing ever. So our journey is not to have the power. We already have the power. We just aren't willing to give ourselves that power until we have the understanding to use it. And that's what human potential is. Human potential is the power of God at the ready. And it's just about you gaining the wisdom of God so that you can make those choices, so that you can begin to play with that power. So it's not that you're restricted. It's not that you're held down. It's not that you're being suppressed. No, it's none of those things. It's that you're ready to learn the lessons necessary so that you can be available to the power and the truth of what you are as a human being. And we do that with every action. And as kids, we choose the parents and the story that the parents play out prior to incarnation so that we can limit ourselves in certain areas, specifically so we can learn what it feels like to be powerless here, so that we can understand the wisdom of that. And in that wisdom, we are then capable of applying that power. Because true power is the ability to do anything and everything and change the entire world and choose not to. When you can have the power of God and choose not to use it, then you're being responsible. Because everyone's choice is important. Everyone's process, everyone's games are important. And it's really hard to see that sometimes because we take things personal. But if you don't take things personal and you actually just look at the world, you can see how intensely beautiful it can be. And if you can actually accept the world for what it is, and you can become into that power, you'll begin to realize that as you gain that power, you don't need to use it. That it's never been about you using that power, but rather just being that power. Because you can become a force for change without actually having to change anything. That's what being an example is. That's the greatest value of what human potential is. Yes, we are capable of all of these gifts. We can become channels, we can be mediums, we can be clairvoyants, clairaudience, all these other words that we can use. Or we can just live today as best we can and continue to grow into something greater. And if we're fortunate enough to have beings that look up to us as examples, we can assist them to not be limited by our own belief structures and our own personality. And I think that that's the greatest calling that we have. I'm not a parent, so I don't have kids yet. Someday I really hope to have kids, but at this time, it doesn't work for me. I do have students, and I've had those students for 10 plus years. So I've had the opportunity of being a parent in a different way. And it is pretty much the same, not the same level of attachment and energy and all that other stuff, but you really do go through the same patterns as a parent as you do as a teacher. You want to protect them from the world. And then you realize it's not your job to protect them from the world. And then you want to help them make the right decisions. And then you realize it's not your job to help them make the right decisions. It's your job to be there when they don't.
Yeah.
So that they have someone to come to and say, hey, I messed up and I really don't understand why. And then you're just there and you say, it's okay. You're not dead. You're still breathing, which means that you didn't mess up at a level that was impossible to fix.
Yeah.
You have time to prepare. You have time to become better. And then eventually what happens is you step back and you look at your child and you say, hey, this is incredible what you're doing. You celebrate their successes. You help them to expand. But you never discount what they have to say, because what they have to say is just as important as everything that you know to be true. Even if what they have to say proves to be untrue in your world currently, it doesn't matter because they're talking from their world. And kids have a very different perspective than we do. We've forgotten what perspective they have, most of us. And that process of remembering is beautiful, because if you listen to a child when they talk to you, they will tell you from the most innocent, most beautiful place what they believe to be true. And it can shake out the disbelief inside of you. It can renew hope within you. Their job is to be the next generation, which leads us into greater value, which leads us into a better progressed world. Our job is to help hold space for them to do that and to be there when they need us, not to be there to take care of them all the time. You see, if we don't ever let them fall or fail, when they get older, when they fall and fail, it will be too much for them. As a kid, their bodies heal faster. It's pretty cool. Like if you have a kid and they fall and they scrape their leg, it's not as big of a deal. If you have an elderly person who falls, it could be death for them. And it's important to understand that, like, they are not as breakable as we make them. They are not as fragile as we make them out to be. Now, does that mean you should put them intentionally in harm's way? No. But at the same time, don't remove all of the things that allow them to explore fully. I've seen so many parents these days. Like, I was raised back before all the other stuff happens, right? Like, I could actually go outside as a kid. I could walk around. I could explore. I could climb swing sets. It didn't matter. I was able to explore. I actually have a scar right here from where a bolt went through my arm because I climbed a swing set and I fell down, and the bolt that holds the swing went through my arm all the way. I don't really remember the trauma of that experience. I was a little kid. It's okay. I have a scar in the top of my head where my head fell and busted open on a brick ledge. Scared my mom to death. But I was fine. I lived. I'm here now today. Now, am I saying that your kid should go through those experiences? Absolutely not. But if they choose to go through those experiences, don't call yourself a failed parent, because that's the trap that the world's pushing on you right now. They're saying, hey, your kid should never experience anything other than bliss and happiness, and you should provide everything at all times for them. Okay, now where's your kid's gratitude going to be? It's not going to be there. Where's your kid's sense of wonder going to be? It's not going to be there. Where's your kid's ability to explore? It's not going to be there. They're going to become reliant because you never left room for them to find who they are. And that is what takes our human potential. The story that we have to become reliant on someone else or some system to survive. As a kid at the beginning, it's true, but it doesn't have to stay true. And for a lot of parents, it's really hard for them to let go and let them do that.
So it comes down to control, right? We spoke about this previously, which has been my journey. And I love that. If we never leave the room, they don't find out who they are. And it's such an amazing statement. And I think from my journey, and we've spoken about this briefly, was more around, like, it's really a process of learning to let go of control. And especially in a co-parenting situation, which I'm in, is learning to let go of that control when she's with someone else. and not, you know, and that's been quite a big lesson as well. And it all encompasses what you're talking about, in the sense of, I find at the core of all of my grasping to try and give her the best life possible, and even from a perspective of giving her the best spiritual opportunity, in some sense that is also inhibiting her own personal growth, because I'm trying too hard to ensure that she does get that instead of just letting it be. And so yeah, I think it's a really valid statement.
Yeah, the key is faith. And that's something that we don't really understand quite yet. We're discovering it. We're really beginning to discover it, because for the longest time, faith was attached to spirituality and religion and all these other words, right? Faith is not about that. Faith is, if I leave the room and I know that the room has nothing that could kill my child, it's okay for them to fall. When they start screaming for me, I slowly walk towards them. I don't rush towards them. Because if I rush towards them at their call, I'm teaching them that they don't have the time to heal themselves. And I do this with my practices. The way that I teach my students is I let them make mistakes, and they make lots of them all the time. And it's beautiful, because it's not my job to fix them. It's my job to be there when they are ready to be working on and changing, and to find their own answer of how to do it. And many times I just sit there and I watch them go through all these mistakes, and they're like all chaotic and everything. And I'm just there, not even doing anything, just watching them flail around. They're just having fun. And then they come to me and they're like, hey, Jason, why didn't you stop this? You could have easily done it. You told me that you knew 4 months ago that I was going through this. And I'd be like, you never came to me. My job is to know that you are perfect until you tell me otherwise. As a parent, you're going through this. Like when your kid gets injured, if they don't cry out for you, then they believe they have the ability to heal that. And they have an innate ability to heal in ways we don't even understand. Now, does that mean that if you see them like bleeding and like you want to go to them, you wouldn't rush over there and put a Band-Aid directly on that? You would say, do you want a Band-Aid? You open up to a dialogue and a discussion instead of being the one that is the go-to. You want them to become the go-to. This is how we get into our true human potential. And for those of us that weren't raised this way, it's not our parents' fault. We didn't know what we didn't know, just like they didn't know what they didn't know. And that's okay. But we're moving into a new paradigm of parenting. We're moving into a new paradigm of education. We're moving into a new paradigm of humanity, right? And in this paradigm, we have our potential back. So what does that look like? Well, if you have someone that's your go-to other than you, go ahead and claim your power back from that individual right now, because that's not what it's about. And it's never been about that. Your go-to is not anything but you. Does that mean that once you go to you and you find out that you're supposed to go to Bob, that you shouldn't go to Bob? No, because you went to you first. You see, that's the important part. You took that pause and said, what do I need? Okay, what I need is not something that I can currently give myself right now, and that's okay. So I'm going to go learn from Bob what I actually need so that I can provide it to myself in the future. That is a healthy relationship. And that is in all relationships. It's in your marriage, it's in your boyfriend or your girlfriend, it's in your parenting, it's in your relationship with your parents in general. Like every relationship out there, you should be your go-to. Nothing else, no one else. And from that space, when you are at your go-to and you're asking yourself the questions, you're asking your body what it needs, you're asking your spirit what it needs, you're asking what you need in this world, then if it says that you need support from something, that's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to be grateful for, because that means you actually have someone in your life who can teach you something or help you remember something that you've forgotten. And you see, human potential has never been designed to be one and only one. That's the biggest misunderstanding there is. And that looks like, well, I should know everything always, and if I don't, then I suck at being a human. Well, actually, it's the opposite. We're here to work together. It's never been about just being a lone wolf. A lot of people went the lone wolf route for a very long time, I included. But now we're in this place where it's a team game. We're at the end game. We're at a point where we have to work together because the content is no longer soloable. It's at a point now where if I don't know the answer, I know someone that does. And that's beautiful. And there are lots of questions I don't know the answer to because I'm not God. I'm in the process of becoming. And that is the most amazing thing to say because you're in the process of becoming. And it doesn't matter what it is. It can be, I'm in the process of becoming a master of blank. Because the moment that you take that first step, you've begun the journey. And it doesn't matter how long it takes to get to the destination because the journey is just as fun, if not more fun. The destination often is kind of a letdown if that's what you're running towards. But the journey towards it, when you get to the destination and you look back, is way more fun. You meet all kinds of cool people, you have a blast, and you never know where you're going to go. The destination is set in your mind, so you know exactly where you're going to go. So there's no real uniqueness to it. So remember, when you think of human potential and you think of, oh, I want to be a psychic, that's cool, that's your end goal. All the things that get you to being a psychic is actually going to be more powerful lessons and more amazing things than this gift that you've held to be greater. Because you are greater. And every adventure that you get to go on is greatness. So embrace that greatness.
Yeah, really good. And I think there's a really big lesson there as well for our children, right? So instead of trying to get them to the end game as well quickly without that journey along the way. So as you were talking, it was kind of like, you know, there's old school parenting of that pressure of success, but actually it's really is more around allowing them to, and they live so much in the moment anyway, but allowing them that, it, you know, each of that day and each of that moment is that gift versus that whatever it is, whether it's the, you know, learning to swim or if they're at school or whatever they're doing throughout their day. Yeah. So Jason,
Exactly.
oh no, keep going. You go.
No, I was just thinking exactly.
Go.
You were right.
Yeah. So a little bit on the topic of children. So from your perspective, when you were younger, I think you have mentioned before when you were around 4, you had awareness that you were here and had a greater purpose. And I just wondered if you're okay talking about that a little bit because it'd be really helpful. Part of what I've been doing and talking to other people is around trying to get those insights from people who had that awareness as a younger child and were aware of their gifts and their stronger connection to their intuition to try and get insights as how to best support them through their journey from the perspective of the child, if that makes sense. So you want to mention anything around that?
Absolutely. So when I was a kid, I would write like things about Pluto and like the keys to the heart and all these other things about different planets and where they're stored. And it was very interesting because I was very creative and imaginative is what my mom would say. But looking back at those documents, because I finally went back and read, my mom kept a really good scrapbook, some of those documents, and I was like, I knew more then than I know now. And it was incredible. I was very fortunate because my mom fought for me on every level possible. I was diagnosed severely dyslexic, severely ADD, and severely ADHD. So I had the trifecta, as some people call it. I couldn't read very well. I couldn't understand people very well. Everything was very different for me, the way that I looked at the world. And so my mom sent me to this place called Scottish Rite Hospital, where they ran all these tests and figured out like how I understood and how I learned. And see, back in the day, they didn't have all this stuff. Now, like actually when I was born, they were just coming into understanding what dyslexia was and how the brain worked and what it really was. And it's really cool because the questions they asked me, the tests they gave me, all the things that they did helped me to understand how humans consider intelligence. And even as a little kid, I didn't really understand their way of trying to figure out whether I was intelligent. And one question that they asked me, which is really funny, but they said, so what's it like being dyslexic? And I was utterly confused by the question because I didn't know what it was like not to be dyslexic. And so that's what I said. And then they like labeled me genius and all this other stuff because they were like, no kid would think like that. You would say, well, you know, there's these colors, but I wanted to understand them. And see, as I got older, that never changed. My very first girlfriend, we were jumping on a trampoline and I did a super bounce and she flew off and broke her leg. And she was in so much pain and all this stuff was coming up for her and I couldn't understand it. And I wanted to relate to it so I could understand it. So I did a super bounce and jumped and tried to break my leg right next to her. And it ended up, I can't break bones for some reason. So I ended up laying there completely fine as a kid, just looking at her, trying to understand what she was going through, and I couldn't understand it. And it drove me insane. Like I could not comprehend what people were going through. And that same lesson continued forward. So my mom ended up going to the steps of the Capitol and sitting on the steps of the Capitol because I didn't have a dyslexic school. And I was supposed to. According to Texas law, there's supposed to be a dyslexic classroom for every single kid who has dyslexia. It's a certain way that they teach, it's completely different. So my mom went to Austin that night and sat on the steps until they convened, and she met the congressman who was able to get a classroom the next day. So when I woke up to go to school, I had a dyslexia teacher and everything.
Wow.
And I was very fortunate because my mom got me one of the best dyslexia teachers I think that ever existed. And on top of that, she loved fossils, crystals, and was the head of the planetarium. So it was the most amazing opportunity for me because every time that I began to understand something that human nature would be, she would actually give me a fossil or a crystal or allow me to like learn about the stars and all this other stuff. And so it was like, okay, you get to learn this thing about human. Okay, now here's something really cool about the past or about something that you might understand up here. And it was beautiful because she just wanted me to succeed. And she never discounted anything that I did. She never said that I was a bad kid or anything like that. Whereas my teachers would openly ridicule me. I would physically be abused, not by my teachers, but by the students. They would like call me names. They would physically beat me up. Anything they could do to make me feel less than because I had to go to a special school, all of these things. And it's important to understand that like all of those lessons of growing up in that nature were important to my process. When I ended up finally learning how to understand English and the way that it all functions, I was extremely brilliant. I became a wordsmith. I could have a higher lexicon than the average person, but my reading score was always very low. And that was very interesting because I would be in like 10th grade and be in 6th grade reading because I couldn't understand how to read the things that people wanted to because it was so slow. Like it never made sense to me. I would touch the book and I could understand the book, but I couldn't read it at the way that others wanted to. And one thing about dyslexics is they usually have a very big vocabulary because larger words are easier to spell than the smaller words in English anyway. So when I learned English, I actually learned it being blindfolded and hearing the word spoken. And then eventually, after I could understand it enough, then I would be blindfolded and I would touch the word. Kind of like Braille, but it was the actual letters. So it wasn't dots. And then as the third thing, this is about 4 years of training. In my 4th year, I finally got to take off the blindfold and look at the words and understand what they actually look like. So my brain had to understand everything completely differently, which is so important and very helpful because one thing that she taught me was dyslexia can be a gift or a curse. It's your choice. And she constantly reinforced the positive value of dyslexia. I even watched a video called Dyslexia, the Gift or the Curse. And it was really fascinating because all the people who have been dyslexic throughout history have achieved great things, like a lot of very famous dyslexics. And so you sit there and you go, okay, well, it can be this, or it can be this. And that same level of understanding helped me so much as I progressed forward because every experience came to me and I would be like, well, this is an opportunity. Do I want it to be a curse or do I want it to be something that is a blessing? How can I see this as a blessing? And that simple fact that I had a teacher that helped me to understand that was what changed my life. And then later on, I got the most amazing art teacher. Her name was Miss Matthews. I'll never forget her. There are a few teachers in my entire life that I'll never forget because they changed the way that I look at things. And no matter what I would create, it would be celebrated. No matter how I looked at things, it would be celebrated. It was so beautiful to have things understood from that perspective. And that's what I took away. Like if I have kids in this lifetime, that's how I want to teach. Because I learned everything I needed to learn. Now, if I was wrong about something, they would point out where I could change things. But then, you get other teachers that tell you that you're wrong. So mathematics, I was actually a genius at mathematics, but I could never show my work. No matter what, They would give me the math and I would be like, here's the answer. And they'd be like, you're cheating. And I'm like, no. They're like, you couldn't have possibly solved it that fast. Show your work. And I'm like, I can't show my work. It doesn't, what are you talking about? And then they would be like, well, you're a cheater, so here's this thing. And then they'd be like, you're too stupid, so here's resource and all this other stuff. And so there was always the give and take of it. But the really great teachers, the ones that actually cared about each individual, it changed everything for me. And finding great teachers is, I think, one of our greatest struggles in this world.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate. My mom was for years, she's retired now, but a special ed teacher. That's how she knew that I had dyslexia. When she started noticing the signs, she was like, I'm going to get him tested. I'm going to get him everything he needs. I know exactly what I would wish for every one of my kids, and I'm a great parent. My mom is like my greatest champion, hands down. Like, she truly has saved my life so many times. I mean, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I was a wreck. I had destroyed everything in my body. There was nothing left for me. I had lost all of my pride. I lost all of my hope in the world. And I was addicted to Oxycontin. There was nothing left for me in this world. And my mom refused to let that be the case. And so she championed and began going to colleges, figuring out what she could do. She ended up going to college and then signing me up for college and all the same classes, and then forcing me to go to class, even if I just slept in class, so that I would get the attendance. And then she would have study parties at the house. And then afterwards, she would record those study parties and put them on a CD audio on loop while I was unconscious, so that I would actually pass the test. She went out of her way to make sure that I succeeded. But that style of parenting was what I needed at that moment. Had I been raised a different way with and this is very important to understand, like, every kid is completely different. So I'm not saying how I was raised, how every kid should be raised, because everyone's brains are wired differently. We all have different ways of approaching the world. If you don't understand that, then go do a little bit of research. You'll find that we are all very, very different, and we all need very different things. And what's really cool is if you just listen, you know exactly what that person needs. Each one of my students is completely different, and I don't teach them the same. I might teach them the same principles, but that's it. Because after principles are over, all that's left is choice. You have the principles in view, and you now just see where you go. And as a parent, I think that's all we could do, is strive to be the best example of the principles we want to impart, and then just have faith that they're going to figure out what it means for them. Because if we push our principles on them, then they rebel against our principles. If we are an example of them, then they usually become them.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's all about the leading, you know, with anything. You know, my daughter joins in with my chanting, with my yoga, you know, and it's not about asking them to do that. It's around them having an example to be able to follow of these things, you know, with nature, all that kind of thing. Yeah, it is amazing. I have a very strong passion to change the schooling system, or at least to create new spaces for children where they can learn in that way and develop in that way. I'm not sure yet how that's going to happen, but it is definitely something I'm really passionate about. And the more I talk to people, the more that there's such a big awareness of this happening all over the world with people I've spoken to. And yeah, and I think it's really, really exciting. I think that shift will happen. It's just the when, really, I guess.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm very passionate about as well. Even though I don't have kids, I understand that kids are our future. And if we don't start working with them as if they are our future, and we don't start investing in them as if they are our future is not as bright as we're hoping. Because we can only do so much before the next generation steps up to do what they're here to do. And if we don't prepare the way for them, and at the same time help them prepare themselves for what's to come, then our future isn't going to be as bright as we're hoping. Doesn't matter how much energy channels change, doesn't matter all the other stuff. It's a group effort. We're all working together to create a massive change. Because we're asking to change the paradigm. Paradigm that's been in place for thousands of years, we're asking to change. That doesn't just happen overnight. That is, we pray that doesn't open up. Because if that happens overnight, woo, good luck enjoying life. If the entire paradigm that we lived in changed overnight and there was no infrastructure put into what the future paradigm would look like, you would go back 8,000 years, not forward. And so people out there are feeling the call to create new education systems. I've met a lot of them, and I'm actually going to introduce them to you because I think that
Thank
you
you.
guys having discussions around this kind of stuff would help to create that, because good discussions change the world. And we were talking about this earlier, but it's not about my message, it's about the message. It's not about your message, it's about the message. It's not about whose clients are what or whose following is what. It doesn't matter, because it's not about that. It's about getting the message out to as many people as are ready to listen. Like I don't care about anything else, because why would you? We're all on a team. I don't care how many clients you have or how many clients I have. If you have a good discussion that's ready to be taken, let's do it. You know, that's what we're here to do. Have great discussions that change the world. I actually am really working on the education system as well through what I call Center for Expansion. And Center for Expansion is a nonprofit that is designed to provide education to the world. We're going to build them all over the world, and anyone who has something of value to contribute can. It's going to be a beautiful model, but like I said, it takes time, it takes resources, and we're in the process of getting the funding together. With the whole COVID thing and everything getting shut down, it wasn't easy at first, but now we're hoping to start opening up events again, maybe even at the end of this month, if all goes well. Lawyers are signing all the documents, getting it all together so that we can do what we need to do. But the process of the future is about these discussions being shared. And that's how it works. Then these discussions are heard by someone who goes, I have a piece of that too. And then they come together and they say, hey, I have a piece of that too. And then they come together. Tomorrow I have a talk with a group of people who did just that. The UCAN Foundation. They've begun the journey of finding the people to create a new world. And it's just about these discussions, and someone hears it. Because if you show up, the rest comes together. So today, Natasha, you showed up. And I was so grateful for it, because this conversation of human potential and the simplicity of it is imperative. Like, it's not hard to unlock your human potential. I gave you a step at the very beginning that does it in like less than a month. All you have to do is the work. And the work is faster and easier than it's ever been. And tomorrow will be even easier. More people are doing it. The path that used to be a little tiny tightrope across this huge ravine and scared the crap out of people has now become a full-on bridge. And the ravine is being filled in every single person that walks across it, until eventually there's no divide anymore. And that's the change that we're looking for. And it comes from these discussions. Just people talking about things from their perspective, being themselves, that's key. And then everything changes.
That's so true. And that's what I've, often said within some of these videos that I've done is it's not, and has never been about me. It's about, and even with the spaces and creating the spaces, it's about who can I collaborate with. And even if I'm not involved, who can I bring together? Because it's really just what that end purpose is and what that outcome is. And it's using the different skills and abilities of people and their knowledge and where they're at to actually bring people together for that achievement, because you can't do it alone. And then there's all aspects, right? There's the financial side and the purchase of a building or a space, or the distribution of it, or how it all comes together, or the people that know what needs to be taught. It's massive. Totally spot on. And you've opened one of the centers in, is it Dallas?
Anna, Texas. It's right outside of Dallas, Texas. Yeah.
Awesome. That's very cool.
Yeah, we're in the process. We're hoping to have our grand opening in November or December for the MTVO Clubhouse, which is going to be this amazing 7,200 square foot state-of-the-art facility that people can come and teach classes, and people will come in from all over the world, and it's going to be amazing. We're going to have really great workshops and just help people get what they want in life. So
when was that? Sorry.
November or December of this year, if everything goes well. Again, things are pretty weird right now, so it's kind of hard to know when things are, especially since a lot of things that we ordered got lost in shipping and transit because of everything else that's happened, and it's just been really fun. This is one of those practices of acceptance. Like, all right, my project is on hold because this item didn't show up that is now back where it started, but never got returned to sender and is now on its way back to me. I don't understand this, but that's okay. It's just one of those things. Like, there is a perfect time, and I don't know when it is. Our goal was November or December, but if it's February of next year, so be it. If it's December of next year, it'll be what it'll be when it will be, and I'm okay with that. There's a divine timing at play here, and I just don't understand it yet, and that's okay. All I can do is the best I can do with what I have available.
Exactly.
So that being said, I'm hoping for November or December, but I'm open to whatever.
Yeah, that's exciting. Jason, do you have anything more to add around your human potential topic or anything else?
I feel like the most important thing is what I said before. The only way that you can ever lose your human potential is you give it away. So if you are not living your potential, that's because you gave it away. All you have to do is figure out who you gave it to. And the most important question you can ever ask yourself is, if this situation were to occur, and it can be any situation, let's say that the earthquake happens in your town, who would you run to first? Would it be yourself or would it be someone else? And if that is anyone else, you just take that person and you can do the light of God work on them, or you can do your own way of claiming your power back from them. But then you ask yourself the question again. And if it's still not yourself, then you do the work on that next person. And you keep doing that in every situation until you're your go-to in every situation. And then you're now in human potential. You've now unlocked a new level of what you're capable of, because you're relying on yourself for everything first. And again, it doesn't matter if when you rely on yourself, you find out that you actually need to go talk to Bob, right? Because that is not a negative thing. That is still you relying on yourself and realizing in that moment of time and space that you don't have the answer yet. And then you go and find the person that does have the answer, but you already checked in with yourself. That is the most important step. You should be your first go-to for any question asked. And then from there, feel free to ask the question.
Yeah.
Because you'll notice that your question that you were going to ask changes the moment it comes into you. And it's more fine-tuned if you don't have the answer already. Because you go, well, I understand most of that, but I don't understand this one little piece. And then, wait, I know this person that does. And then all of a sudden you come back, and then the next time this thing happens, you go, I understand how to handle this. And you don't need to go to this person anymore. Any true teacher out there, like true teacher, any real one that's worth anything, doesn't want you to be their student long-term. They just are there while you need them. If you were to ask a parent if they want you to rely on them or themselves, you would have to, I mean, not every parent would agree with this, but as a parent, I would hope that I would be able to say, I really hope someday you don't need me. Doesn't mean that I don't want to be in your life. Doesn't mean that I don't want to be around you and play with you and have fun with you, but I don't want you to need me. Because if we can play instead of have a need for, all of a sudden the game changes. Because we're free to experience every outcome instead of a very small one. So the human potential is really just about, do I need anyone other than me to play? And the answer is always no to that. Do I want to expand my level of play? And do I need someone in that way? Okay, cool, I can do that. But you can play no matter what. No matter what situation, you could be in a concrete box under the ground, and you can still find ways to play. And I mean, that would suck, so try not to do that. But if you did decide to do that, for whatever reason, you can find ways to play. So it's about being creative. And humans are very creative. We're the most creative there is. If you actually look at what we are capable of, if we had our human potential, you would never worry about anything that's going on in the world. We would solve it. If we had our true potential online right now, every issue in the world would be solved within probably a year. Every issue. Because we would come together, we would have the dialogues and discussions, we would have the resources available, and we would create a brand new world from the ashes of this one. And it wouldn't mean that we would have to burn this world down, but naturally certain things would come to a completion. And those ashes are the resource that builds the next one. In my last talk that I did, I don't remember if it was a live one or not a live one, but I said, you don't have to tear the world down in order to rebuild it. You don't, and you never had to. If you believe you do, then you're part of the problem, not part of the solution. Because nothing is inherently wrong with this world. Everything is designed perfectly. And the more that you understand the wisdom of God, you actually begin to see that. Because everything is perfect. You look back at your life and you go, oh, well, nothing actually ever happened in my life that wasn't perfect, because look who I've become. And when you can have those eyes and you can use that on the future, now you have the wisdom. And now you also have the power, because it comes online every time that you become like every wisdom that comes forward, more power comes. Wisdom, power. Wisdom, power. And it's never, ever the other way around. Power doesn't come and then wisdom. We tried that. It didn't work very well. It was very, 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 very bad, actually. So now it goes the other way, because when you have the wisdom, the power comes naturally to do what you need to do. And that power could be the resources. So when you truly know what you're here to do, you find that you have the support to do it. So if you don't have the support to do it right now, ask yourself, who's your go-to other than you? Because that's what you're missing. That's all that's keeping you from your human potential right now.
Yeah, Jason, there's an amazing quote that's kind of similar to that, which I just kept coming to mind as you were talking. And this is not verbatim, but if I were to ask you what you loved in this world, how long would it take before you labeled yourself? And so as you were talking through that, it's really around that inner self, right? Like it's coming from me, from self, from us, versus looking for that on the outside and trying to resolve from that. And the other thing too is, you know, with my lens currently around the parenting side, is really empowering and harboring our children to ask themselves and do the problem solving within themselves and being able to guide them. And even and I've mentioned this before in some of the lives I've done, it's these subtle differences that I'm starting to apply, where I've recognized that telling my daughter something as simple as how proud I am of her, I'm now changing that to asking her if she is proud of herself for her action. So rather than looking for that external gratification or being needed to be told, kind of even just like turning that around to actually her generating that feeling proud, or whatever the emotional feeling should be for her, and rather than seeking that external influence. So I think that's
awesome.
Kind of how it stems from there, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow. Your kid's already awesome. I can't wait to see what happens a few years from now when they grow even more into their awesomeness.
I think that, but I'm biased, right?
You're biased, but
he's my gorgeous little angel.
Every little kid on this planet, every human on this planet is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but how you parent that child is whether that amazingness grows or diminishes as they get older. And you're an incredible parent. Just the fact that you're willing to do that work, and the fact that you're doing the work on yourself, I can't wait to see what your daughter does in the world as she grows older, and with all the things that are coming. I can't wait to see, because that's
pretty exciting. That is exciting. It's just, there's so much potential there with our children. And I get really, it just warms my heart. It's amazing. Yeah. Okay, anything else you'd like to add? That's been amazing.
I actually feel pretty complete. I feel like we covered what we needed to cover. People understand what human potential is and how to get it back, so that they're ready for the new world, because the new world is going to ask you to be awesome. And that means that you get to go inward and find out, who do I go to get awesome? Because if the answer is Bob, then you need to go inward to yourself first to find that it's Bob. Always be your go-to. That's my leaving remark. Always be your go-to. From there, go wherever you need to go, but always be your go-to.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for everyone who joined us. There's currently 74 people still watching. We can go through the comments and reply and all sorts as needed. Yeah, me too.
This is my second live today, so
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much, Jason. It's been amazing. Thank you.
Have a blessed and beautiful one. Bye, guys.
You too. Bye.